Imagine it's the 4th of July. You step out onto your porch, expecting the sweltering humidity of a typical American summer. Instead, your breath hitches in the air. You see a pale, sickly sun struggling to pierce through a thick, copper-colored haze that has choked the sky for months. Beneath your boots, the ground doesn't crunch with dry grass, it shatters. A foot of frozen black snow blankets your fields. The corn you planted to feed your children is dead. The birds have stopped singing. The world is silent, cold, and dying. For 2 centuries, the gatekeepers of history have given us a tidy explanation. They point to a map of Indonesia and whisper a name, Mount Tambora. They tell us a volcanic eruption spewed enough ash into the atmosphere to dim the sun and freeze the globe. It's a convenient story. It's a safe story. But the stones tell a different tale. If 1816 was just a volcanic winter, why are the foundations of our oldest cities buried under 10 feet of mysterious, sterilized silt? Why do the star forts of the Atlantic coast show signs of being blasted by temperatures exceeding 1,300 circa C heat that no volcanic ash can produce? And why, in the immediate wake of this natural disaster, did the name of the world's largest empire, Tartaria, vanish from every map, every textbook, and every library on Earth? Today, we are going beyond the year without a summer. We are uncovering the Great Reset of 1816. This wasn't a tragedy of nature. It was the aftermath of a global high-tech war. It was the moment the old world was unplugged and the new world was forced into a medicated silence. Welcome to the year history went dark. To understand the weapons of 1816, we have to look at the ruins. Across Europe, Asia, and North America, there is a phenomenon that mainstream archaeology refuses to discuss in public: vitrification. Vitrification occurs when stone, granite, basalt, or sandstone is subjected to such intense, concentrated heat that its molecular structure changes. It literally turns into glass. To achieve this, in a massive stone structure like a star fort or a medieval castle, you need a sustained temperature of at least $1,100 circ C dollar to $1,300 circ C dollar, $2,012 circ F dollar to $2,372 circ F dollar. A wood fire, no matter how large, peaks at around $600 circ C dollar. A volcanic ash cloud, by the time it travels thousands of miles, is cold $8 A. So, what melted the stone? Look at Fort Jefferson in Florida or Fort Delaware. These are masterpieces of geometric precision, built with millions of red bricks and massive granite blocks. We are told they were built by pioneers using hand tools and horse-drawn carts. Yet, when you examine the exterior walls, you find sections where the brick has bubbled and fused together. In the Tartarian framework, these star forts weren't military outposts. They were atmospheric energy hubs. They were the power plants of the old world, designed to pull free energy from the ether. In 1816, these hubs were targeted. This wasn't a war of cannons and muskets. It was a war of directed energy weapons, DEW. By targeting the frequency-resonant geometry of the star forts, the founders of the New World caused a massive, localized thermal overload. The stones didn't just burn, they liquefied. The energy grid of the global Tartarian Empire was systematically short-circuited from the sky, leading to the global cooling event we now call the year without a summer. Witnesses in 1816 didn't just describe the sky as dark, they described it as copper, bronze, and strangely luminous. This is a critical forensic detail. Volcanic ash is gray, dull, and opaque. It blocks light. A copper-colored, glowing sky is a classic signature of atmospheric ionization. When high-energy weapons, possibly orbital or high-altitude plasma discharges, interact with the gases in our atmosphere, they strip electrons from molecules, creating a plasma glow. The radioactive echo. In the years following, 1816 medical records from the newly formed state hospitals across the U.S. began to document a terrifying spike in the Great Wasting Disease. Patients were suffering from sudden hair loss, non-healing skin lesions, internal hemorrhaging, total immune system failure. The doctors of the 1800s, lacking the vocabulary of the atomic age, called it melancholy or the consumption. But today, any nuclear physicist would recognize these as the symptoms of radiation sickness. The year without a summer wasn't cold because of ash. It was cold because the atmosphere had been fundamentally altered by a global exchange of high-frequency energy weapons. 1816 was a nuclear winter, before the word nuclear was even invented. If the thermal war of 1816 wasn't enough, it was followed by a geological catastrophe that physically buried the evidence of the old world. This is the Mudflood. In almost every major city in America, Omaha, Kansas City, New York, Salt Lake City, you will find the same architectural anomaly: buried windows. Grand stone buildings, supposedly built in the mid-1800s, have full-sized, ornate windows that sit 3 to 6 feet below the current ground level. The official history says they built them that way for light in the basement. The truth: no architect in a world of hand labor and expensive stone would waste millions of dollars building a grand marble facade only to bury it in the dirt. When the Earth's energy grid, the Tartarian etheric grid, was sabotaged in 1816, it released massive amounts of vibration into the tectonic plates. This caused a phenomenon called soil liquefaction. Under intense vibration or thermal stress, solid ground behaves like a liquid. The massive Tartarian cities, built with high-density stone and iron, literally sank into the ground as the earth beneath them turned to slurry. When the vibration stopped and the ground solidified, the first floors of the old world were trapped beneath a layer of sterilized, mineral-rich silt. This is why we find buried cities all over the American West. The pioneers didn't build these cities, they excavated them. They found them half buried in mud, washed the windows, and put a new world flag on the roof. If you want to hide a civilization, you don't just burn the buildings, you burn the memory of where they were. Before 1816, if you walked into a library in London, Paris, or New York and pulled out a world map, you would see a massive landmass spanning from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific Ocean. It was labeled in bold, elegant script, Grand Tartary. It was listed in the 1771 Encyclopedia Britannica as the largest country in the world. Yet, by the mid-1800s, this empire, a civilization with its own flag, its own language, and its own sophisticated architecture, had been rezoned into Siberia, Mongolia, and Manchuria. In 1957, an internal CIA document was circulated, later declassified under the title National Cultural Development under the Bolsheviks. This document contains a chilling directive. It explicitly mentions the need to rewrite the history of Central Asia to eliminate the memory of Tartar achievements. Why would a modern intelligence agency care about an obscure 18th century region? Because Tartaria wasn't just a region, it was a global power system. The reset of 1816 was the military phase. The 19th century was the administrative phase. While the survivors were still reeling from the nuclear winter and the mudflood, the founders of the New World were busy in the back rooms of universities and government offices, redrawing the maps and ensuring that the next generation would never even know the name of the empire they stood upon. Imagine you are a survivor of the 1816 cataclysm. You remember the cities of stone. You remember the etheric lights that didn't need wires. You are traumatized, but you are a witness. To the architects of the New World, you are a liability. This is where the most heartbreaking chapter of American history begins. The orphan trains, 1854, 1929. Official history tells us that 250,000 orphans were gathered from the streets of New York and Boston and shipped west to find loving homes on farms. But look at the numbers. Where did 250,000 orphans suddenly come from? The answer is found in the state hospitals and asylums. In the mid-1800s, adult survivors of the Old World were being committed to insane asylums at an unprecedented rate. Their insanity? They refused to accept the new narrative. They still talked about the old world. They were labeled delusional and locked away in stone vaults. Once the parents were committed, their children became wards of the state. These children, the literal descendants of the Tartarian elite, were placed on trains. They were stripped of their names, their family Bibles, and their heritage. They were shipped to the Midwest, given to strangers, and told, "You are lucky, we saved you. Your parents are dead. Your history begins now." By separating the generations, the founders created a population reset. The adults died in the asylums, and the children grew up with no one to tell them the truth. The orphan train wasn't a charity mission. It was a reprogramming operation. It was the way the new world washed the human memory clean. If you were a survivor who wouldn't stop talking about the fires in the sky of 1816, you were sent to a Kirkbride asylum. These buildings, as we established, were repurposed Tartarian energy hubs. The founders turned the very temples of the old world into prisons for its survivors. Look at the intake reasons for the Trans-Allegheny lunatic asylum: reading novels, political excitement, religious fervor, imaging female trouble. But the secret reason was memory of the old world. Inside these walls, the patients were subjected to treatments that modern science recognizes as neural scrambling. The static machine, using atmospheric energy to blast the brain. Hydrotherapy, freezing the body to induce shock. Chemical sedation, using bromides to dull the consciousness. The asylums were the black sites, where the truth was buried. Every grandstone hospital in America is a cemetery for the minds that refuse to forget Tartaria. As the American pioneers moved west in the late 1800s, they began excavating the cities that the mudflood of 1816 had buried. In the foundations of these cities, and within the thousands of mounds scattered across the Ohio Valley, they found something that broke the new Darwinian narrative: giant human remains. Thousands of skeletons, ranging from 7 to 12 feet tall, often with double rows of teeth and sophisticated jewelry, were unearthed. Local newspapers from the 1880s were filled with these reports. Enter the Smithsonian Institution. Under the leadership of Major John Wesley Powell, the Smithsonian began a national survey. Agents were sent to every site where a giant skeleton was found. They collected the remains for study, and they were never seen again. Why? Because the founders had just established a new history: the theory of evolution. This theory claimed that humans were getting smarter and better, but the Tartarian giants proved that we were de-evolving. They proved that a superior, more powerful race of humans had built the star forts and the stone palaces. To protect the new science, the Smithsonian became the nation's shredder. They didn't just hide the bones, they hid the proof that you are a diminished version of your ancestors. By the late 1800s, many Tartarian structures were still standing, and people were starting to ask questions. The mudflood windows were too obvious. The etheric spires were too mysterious. The solution? The Great Fires. Between 1871 and 1910, almost every major city in America suffered a catastrophic fire. Chicago, 1871. Boston, 1872. Seattle, 1889. San Francisco, 1906. Look at the photos of Chicago in 1871. You see marble and granite buildings turn to white ash. A wood fire does not do this. Granite melts at $1,215, circ C dollar. To turn a city of stone into ash, you need directed energy. The fires were the controlled demolitions of the 19th century. They cleared out the sophisticated Old World infrastructure so it could be replaced by the New World grid, a grid dependent on metered energy. This is where the money comes in. The founders, Rockefeller, Morgan, Rothschild, realized that they couldn't control a population that had access to free atmospheric energy. They had to force us into a scarcity model. They burned the Tartarian energy hubs, rebuilt the cities with modern steel and coal, and created the oil economy. 1816 was the war. The Great Fires were the foreclosure on the human race's energy independence. Why are we talking about this now? Why is the Tartaria topic exploding in the American consciousness in 2026? Because the frequency control is failing. The plaster is peeling off the state houses, and we are seeing the red brick beneath. We are looking at the buried windows and realizing we've been lied to. This isn't just a story for your entertainment. It's a call to action. Look at your local post office. Is it a Greek temple? Why? Look at your city's history of the fire. Does it make sense? Look at your own genealogy. Does it stop abruptly in the mid-1800s? The founders thought they could bury the truth in mud and ash. They thought they could drug us into forgetting. But the memory of the old world is written in our very cells. We aren't just evolved monkeys struggling for survival. We are the exiled princes and princesses of a golden age. The year history went dark was meant to be the end of our story, but today, the light is coming back. The next time you walk past a massive stone building with buried windows, don't just see a basement. See a tomb. See a monument. And remember, they didn't build it. They found it. And if they lied about that, what else are they hiding?